Usually I'm flying back to Nova Scotia.
Okay, welcome everyone. And we will call to order our regular meeting of council and acknowledge and recognize that we work, live, and play in the city of Port Alberni, which is situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Sechot and Huipachesset First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from council? Seeing none, any late items to add from our corporate officer?
No late items, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Next, we have minutes on our agenda from the special meeting held at 9:30 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on February 12th, 2024. Move to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none on the motion to adopt, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. We have no delegations today and one item of unfinished business, and this is the 5-year financial plan Q&A summary, and this is a summary of questions and responses as it relates to the 2024 to 2028 financial planning process. And I will go to our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as we usually do, we update the question and answer sheets and we have the responses in there. So if there's anything that council would like to pull out or any additional questions, we could also start to populate some more in the sheet. So I'm here to take any questions and respond if we can. But if not, we'll follow up at our next Committee of the Whole on March the 4th.
Thank you. Any questions about the Q&A document or additional questions to add from council? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for the document. And council, just a reminder that we do have another Committee of the Whole coming up to discuss the budget. And as many questions as we can get in ahead of time, that way we can have information to discuss at the meeting. Move on to staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated February 26, 2024 be received and checks numbered 154404 to 154474 inclusive in payment of accounts totaling $1,203,267.65 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments or questions on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And bylaws, item number 1, we have the Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw, amendment number 1, bylaw number 5086-1, 2024. And I'll go to our Director of Finance for this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I know this was an item that was deferred or referred from a prior meeting. So I just wanted to make a note that we did look back at the DCC requirement, and the city does not have a establishment bylaw for DCCs. From the time that the DCCs were enacted back in 2010, the city has kept the funds that were available from the DCCs and interest in a separate fund, tracking separately and reporting out annually for what has incurred each year with the spend and revenue. But we do need to bring back a DCC establishment reserve bylaw. When we looked at this about a year and a half ago for the reserve establishment bylaw and trying to consolidate them all into one, we looked at the reserves as separate from the DCCs because of how they're tracked and how they are listed within our financial statement. They are considered a future revenue, or at the time that we accrue them, they aren't revenue until we actually identify the specific project. Now, looking back at our DCC bylaw, we do need to make some updates to it. We are bringing a report to the Committee of the Whole. At that time, we'll be asking the committee to recommend the council have the establishment of those reserves for DCCs moving forward. But at this time, staff are recommending that we move forward with the reserve establishment bylaw, understanding that we will bring forward the establishment bylaws for DCCs. That recommendation coming at the next Committee of the Whole to the committee.
Thank you for the information, and thanks to Councillor Patola for noting that at our last meeting. Are there questions or comments on this? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note that the Schedule A still also does not include the community amenity charges reserve or a parking reserve. Are those intended to be parts of future bylaws brought forward, or are they just not going to be included?
CAO.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, I know on accommodation, one, it is changing with the new legislation. So once we have more information on that, we'll bring one forward for that. As for the parking, I will defer to the Director of Finance.
Madam Mayor, at this time, there is no parking DCC or parking establishment. We have off-street parking for specific properties, but there is no current direction from council to have that. We could add that, but there wouldn't be any revenue that we foresee coming into that reserve. But by all means, we can create a reserve if that is the committee's desire going through council.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems to me that this bylaw is very much a statement of policy of the council. And more than once, I've commented on the lack of the establishment of certain reserves, and we still don't have the establishment of those certain reserves. I know there hasn't been a motion on it because we've had endless conversation. And it doesn't seem to have been noted by the administration that there was some desire on some parts of council to have the reserves fully enacted and available for use. It's a policy, and we're now being told that certain reserves, such as the DCCs, will be brought forward in the future because it will correspond and make administration's work easier because of an accounting procedure. I don't see why simply sticking a paragraph in the reserve fund Schedule A to say that there will be a reserve fund for DCCs at all offends the accounting procedures or the actual accounting itself. I will be voting against this because Section 191 of the Local Government Act requires that if councillors vote in support of a bylaw that relates to approving funding that is contrary to their authority, they are then personally liable and may be sued by any individual who is a taxpayer in the community for those funds. We have DCCs, we use DCCs. For 10 years, we have done it inappropriately. I will not be voting to continue to do that practice for one more day, especially when administration was more than knowledgeable that there was a lack of DCCs in reserve fund and have done nothing immediately to correct that.
Thank you. Director of Finance or CAO, could you speak to the suggestion of adding an additional paragraph into this? And also just again, maybe to reiterate the practice around DCCs, recognizing that it is not a bylaw, but have we reached out to the province on this?
So, Madam Mayor, we have reached out to the province on this and made sure that we had to get the establishment bylaw. So I guess when we look back at it, we were treating the reserves separately when administration were, and felt like we had that in place, but when we reviewed, we did not have that establishment bylaw in place. So we reached out, they said we must have that, we will have that, but it really is council's desire. If council seeks to have one consolidated DCC reserve establishment bylaw, we can provide that. We'll come back, but staff's recommendation, and when we looked at establishing this consolidated bylaw, we looked purely at the reserves, not at the DCCs. And I know they're considered reserves still, but the way that they're treated are slightly different. And when we look at our financial statements, they are separate. So the direction that I gave the deputy director at the time was we will do, like the DCCs are separate. So that's how we move forward with the administration and the recommendation to council. By all means, you know, if council does not agree that we can proceed without having DCCs in place, we are trying to improve and clean up some of the gaps that we have as far as the establishment of our bylaws. But at this time, you know, we do need to bring forward some information because there has been other discussions about DCCs and what we need to do moving forward. So we can pause on this if council feels that it needs to come forward together. But at this time, we're making the recommendation that we move forward with the reserve that we have attempted to consolidate and clean up. And then moving forward, we'll have the DCCs also. So just trying to make sure that we improve everything that we have moving forward.
Thank you. I'm perfectly comfortable with this reserve establishment bylaw as it is, and I do see value in having a separate one rather than adding on a line to this one for the DCCs, recognizing that they are different. Is there a timeline that we need to complete this one on, or would it intervene process in any way if we were to pause this until the DCC bylaw comes forward so that it can be done with comfort from council that both are being established at the same time?
Absolutely. If the council wants to pause on this until we have everything in front, we can do that. And we brought this back because that was the direction from council, knowing that we do have the timing of getting that DCC report to the committee, because we do want to bring it to the committee first to consider the information, as that is our process. It didn't line up, but we can hit pause again. Yes.
Thank you. And I would be a lot more comfortable if we proceed with that DCC bylaw in proper process on its own, rather than rushing it and kind of tacking it on as an afterthought to this bylaw. I think best practice is to have them separate. And if council is more comfortable doing them both at the same time, then I'm perfectly happy with that. So I'll leave that up to discussion with council, but I personally don't see any changes required to this bylaw that's been brought forward today. Comments? Councillor Douglas and then Councillor Patola.
Thank you. I as well am comfortable with voting on this as is and having our staff work on incorporating the DCCs into the reserve process when they can bring that forward to us. Thank you.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know administration has their hands full with many bylaws that need rewriting and bringing many processes up to current standards. This is not a current standard. This is required in the community charter. It's specifically required in the community charter. It's enumerated in its own section in the community charter. I don't see how this can be missed. And to continue to have DCCs in any manner without passing a DCC reserve bylaw puts us in violation of our requirements under the enacting statutes. So I don't see how, even if we've notified the province and they recognize that the intentions and actions of the administration and previous councils was in keeping with the spirit of the legislation, we have now recognized that, and we are not moving forward in a effective and punctual manner to correct that error. To simply say, well, we've talked to them and they say it's okay, we can fix it in the future is a bit of a kind of lackadaisical approach to when we get around to it with no specific idea of when we're going to get around to it. And every day that passes, we are in violation of our enacting statutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patola, are you hoping to be able to vote against this as an outcome, or do you have an alternative suggestion?
My suggestion would be that we direct administration to bring forward a reserve fund establishment bylaw that includes a DCC reserve, a parking reserve, and a community amenities reserve.
You can certainly make that as a motion if you wish. My suggestion, I think personally, that takes us to the same point that we're currently on. That is still, it's going to take us to the same timeline. So my preference would be that we make a motion to begin that process right away, but rather not the reserve fund establishment bylaw, but a separate DCC reserve fund bylaw, as has been recommended by staff, that we give direction to start that process as soon as possible. And in the meantime, if this bylaw is offensive to that bylaw because it doesn't include DCCs, we pause it. I think we are covering ourselves in that sense. If we move forward, we're still keeping them separate, which staff has recommended is the best approach. And we are indicating clearly that we are moving forward on the DCC bylaw. Thoughts, Councillor Patola?
I think I've enunciated my thoughts. And certainly it's open to every member of council to vote their own conscience.
Thanks, Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'm just kind of curious about the liability, as was duly noted by Councillor Patola. I'm just wondering where that stands and go from there.
CAO.
Thanks, through the chair. I believe there is some liability. However, we are bringing the DCC bylaw to the next committee of the whole, which is next Monday. And then it would be on the next council meeting after that. So we are moving as expedient as possible on getting one in place. But we have tried to mitigate, I guess over the years, the liability has been mitigated to some point by treating them as if we did have a bylaw. So I guess that's about all I can say, but there would be some liability there.
Thank you. So I would say the outcome is the same regardless, timeline-wise, to actually get this bylaw in place. Whether we take the bylaw we have on the table today, send it back to staff and ask them to change it and bring it back, or we create a separate bylaw at our next two meetings, I think we're going to end up with a DCC bylaw in place roughly at the same time, regardless. So I would prefer that we do it in a way that is recommended by staff for having two separate bylaws rather than one combined. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, but just throwing it out there, if we put this on hold, if we postpone the voting of this and wait for the other, would it not, it still would work, wouldn't it? Do we need to have this at this moment? I'm hearing it, we don't.
Director of Finance.
Madam Mayor, so the intent was to keep them separate from the start, thinking that we did have a DCC establishment bylaw, but obviously, when we brought forward the recommendation, like I mentioned in my prior statement, is that we were treating them separately, and everything within the reserve bylaw would be treated separately. So we would move forward with this specific bylaw, and hopefully clean up some of the establishment of these bylaws, because some of them were done by resolution. So this was the intent of this one, was to clean up those reserves and make sure that we had the reserves properly established. You know, we do need to make sure that we do get the DCCs, which we will. The staff report is in process and will be at the next meeting, but the recommendation would be to have this separate. So if we proceed with this with the confidence of council, we will have that DCC probably a couple weeks later than this one would be adopted. So,
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Not that I don't agree with staff or anything like that. My holdup on this is the liability. And so that's the only thing that I have is the liability. And there's no guarantee. According to our CEO, there is a little bit of liability. So I have concerns on that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Director of Finance.
as we sit today, there would be no change in the liability, whether it is now or we do it in 2 weeks from now. The liability is still the same, not having the DCC bylaw enacted. So that is coming forward. That will be provided to council to adopt, and we would in all likelihood have that adopted. It's just the question I guess staff is posing to council is that, do you want it together or separate? Because that's really the only issue at this time from the bylaw that we have in front of you today versus having that DCC bylaw brought to you at the next committee of the whole, and then first 3 readings at the March 11th council meeting for the DCC. So if council wants it all together, we can hit pause. If not, then I recommend that council approve the bylaw as presented.
Thank you for clarifying, and I think it's important to separate the issues, and my preference is that we have the 2 bylaws separate specifically, and I think it is important to remember that this one does not affect the other one necessarily. So thanks to staff for diligently working on getting that DCC bylaw to us at our next meeting. Councillor Douglas.
I'd like to make a motion, if I may. That Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw Amendment Number 1, Bylaw Number 5086, 2024 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dame. Additional comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the purposes of Section 191, I'd ask the vote be recorded.
Thank you. We'll record the vote. So I will move, motion is moved and seconded, and I will go to Councillor Mealy first. And if you could just voice your vote out loud as we are recording.
Yes.
Councillor Dame?
Yes.
Councillor Haggard?
Not in favor.
Councillor Patola?
Against.
And Councillor Douglas? Thanks, and I'm in favor as well, so motion passes. Thank you for that, everyone. And Councillor Mealy, if you'd like to, or sorry, Councillor Douglas, to continue on there.
I'd like to make a motion that Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw Amendment Number 1, Bylaw Number 5086, 2024 be read a second time.
Thank you. And Councillor Patola, are you asking that this one be recorded as well? Thank you, then we'll record. And sorry, was there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. And Councillor Mealy, I'll go to you for your vote.
Affirmative.
Thank you. And Councillor Dame?
Yes.
Councillor Haggard?
Yes.
Councillor Solda?
Against.
Councillor Patola?
Against.
And Councillor Douglas?
Yes.
Thank you, and I'm in favor as well. Motion passes. And Councillor Douglas?
Make a motion that Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw Amendment Number 1, Bylaw Number 5086-1, 2024 be read a third time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame and Councillor Mealy for your vote. Oh, sorry. Councillor Patola, would you like this one recorded? We will record this vote as well.
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam
Mealy.
Mayor. In support.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Yes.
Councillor Haggard.
Yes.
Councillor Solda.
Against.
And Councillor Patola.
Against.
And Councillor Douglas.
Yes.
Thank you, and I'm in favor as well. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion, and we will move on to item number 2, which is, unless, is there an additional motion needed, or I think it doesn't hurt to make one that council directs staff to bring back expediently a DCC reserve establishment bylaw. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dame. Any additional comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And we'll move on to fees and charges bylaw amendment number 5, bylaw number 5100 2024, and this is just a final adoption unless there are any questions from council. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would make the motion that fees and charges bylaw amendment number 5, bylaw number 5100 2024 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and a corporate officer numbered 5100.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 3, City of Port Alberni 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan Bylaw number 5097 2024. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read this one as well?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City of Port Alberni 2024-2028 Financial Plan Bylaw number 5097 2024 be read a second time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dame, and I'll go to our Director of Finance for any additional information on process or anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So obviously we do have our next Committee of the Whole, which will be another opportunity for the public, council, the committee at the time, to ask any further questions, to seek any further information, but also today, if there's any members of the public at question period, council today, please ask your questions and we'll try to answer them. Obviously, we are targeting to have this done and adopted by early April, and then at that time we have our tax rates. Noting that we'll also have the average single-family residential house impact at that time in early April, because that's when we bring back the tax share bylaw, or the tax bylaw, sorry, and that represents the share to each classification, and that sets what the impact would be. So if there's any questions that council would like to ask about that, or any additional information, because we are getting to that point where we are bringing that forward, and a good time to ask that. So happy to take any questions, but this is just another opportunity for us to have that discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, we have about a $2 million fire truck that we've already paid for, but we have to try and replenish the ERF fund, correct, for that amount of money? I'm just wondering if there's any advantages or disadvantages to financing that through MIA versus trying to put the money back in the ERF fund, and if that would affect the tax implications at all.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard. With that, I think when we look at the ERF, that's a long-standing program that we have that supported the regular contributions to equipment, and obviously with a large purchase such as the fire truck, we saved up some of that money, most of that money, but there was some gaps because of cost escalation. When we look at considerations, there is the opportunity through MFABC to finance some of these pieces of equipment. With that, there are requirements. There's one consideration that we have. It's the liability limit that we have as far as borrowing. So the more that we borrow, the less that we can borrow, essentially, because it does restrict us and what we have to do to bring these financial impacts forward. So if we do borrow, we have to make sure we check and have that liability limit set. So if we do consider that, it is an option. The interest that we pay on borrowing is significant. It's a little bit higher than the MFA rates. So our MFA rates are probably about 4.2% right now. Equipment borrowing, I think, is about 5.6%. So the interest on that $2 million, if we consider that, would be similar or even a little bit more than I think the regular ERF contributions to start to prop that up. Because I think all for fire, I think it's probably close to 400 and something odd thousand. But if we do a MFA debt replacement for 5 years, which we have to take it in 5-year terms, we could do it up to 20 years, but I think there's some restrictions on going to the public for assent on borrowing beyond the 5 years for equipment. that would probably be maybe about 400 to 425, I think, for the just the debt payment on that for that 5-year period for the fire trucks. So that is something that we do look at as far as options. But because of the IRF and the program that we've had over the years, it's been a great program in place since 1973 and has supported that smoothing out and collection of funds to make the purchases for equipment. It's just we were seeing that cost escalation in a lot of pieces of equipment right now. So yes, it is a good question, but it's something that at this time I don't think staff would have made the recommendation to do that because of the cost per year over the next 5 years to pay that debt off.
Thank you, Andrew. I didn't realize the interest rate was so much higher for equipment, but I appreciate your answer.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank Director for the comments with regards to the division bylaw, for lack of a better word, that will be coming forward in the future, but isn't right before us now. I'm interested in the options and the pros and cons that are available for how we determine the division between classes. I note that over the years, they have changed somewhat, and if it would be an appropriate time to change them again, I don't know. But it seems to me that if one class is irrespectively low due to some decision historically that no longer applies, it might be time to raise that class back up so we can lower the effect on the residential class.
Thank you. I think those are good comments, and it might be worth seeing maybe even like a 15-year history. I think 15 years to incorporate some decisions that were made a long time ago, maybe even a 20-year kind of history on what that split has been for each tax class. I know that we had a lot of discussion a few years ago when there was a significant investment made in the light industrial tax class, and the past practice that we had at the time would have seen that that investment really only benefiting that class. So we did make shifts at that point in time to ensure that if there's a light industrial or a heavy industrial investment made in the community, that residents of the community are feeling that benefit by having those new taxes split across all classes. But we can absolutely make the split whatever we like. So having some information on what that history has looked like, and I think would be very relevant. Andrew, would you like a motion on that, or are you okay to just bring back information?
Madam Mayor, I think I'll bring back some information. I also, just with the historical range too, I think when I look back, I do believe I brought a report back about major industry and how we saw major industry drop significantly from about 2006 to today. So I can update that. It really shows you how the shift in taxation happened over the last 15 to 20 years. And I think that's an important statement because we have relied on that major industry for many years, and it was upwards of 40% when I look back to that time, but I think it was even higher when we go back historically. And just going back over some of the reports, I think it's good information. It provides a lot of good context to council to make the decision, because that tax share, that is, like, we did have that case with Catalyst back in 2009, 2010, where the municipality was successful through the District of North Cowichan, that council has the ability to set the tax share as they see, depending on what they view the need in the community. So it is council's will to split that, but considering all the balancing that you have to do across each component of the tax roll classification. So it was quite interesting in my first couple of years here, just seeing the growth in light industry, because you bring a good point up, Madam Mayor, that we didn't see that, and a lot of the light industry that we did have back previously was with our major industries, so it was components that they had, but we've seen a shift, and it's interesting to note that cabinet makers are included in light industry, our breweries, there's a component in there, and our distillery. So those are some things that are within the light industry class that, based on how we used to conduct business, having light industry and major industry connected, it was quite a shift between business to light industry because those rates. So we did hear once we started to get that new classification, because a lot of that tax roll was shifting from business to light industry, and they're seeing their taxes go up, but that's the classification. And we also delinked major industry and light industry at the same time. So we saw a large component of that of light industry. So very interesting topic. I hope that the committee and council dive into that one a little bit and have some understanding, because it is an important role as far as the tax share across the classifications.
Yeah, thank you for that. A lot of history on it, and probably a lot of information that would be really valuable for council to see and start to understand, because we focus a lot on budget, and budget is obviously the most important thing to ensure that what we're splitting is as reasonable as possible, but how we split it is a huge factor in how people, businesses, and industry feel it. Councillor Solda.
And Madam Mayor, I believe one of my questions about taxation was the class 4 is staying stagnant all the way across for the 5 years, and I'm just wondering why we can't shift that, from residents lower and shift to class 4 a little higher than it's been.
We can do whatever we want, and that's a decision of council when we get to the tax rate bylaw. So having some information on history, why we are where we are, how it's changed over time prior to seeing that tax rate bylaw come forward, I think will be really valuable. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, then we have second reading moved and seconded on the motion. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 4, thank you for that, Director of Finance. Item number 4 will go to OCP and zoning bylaw amendments for 2856 4th Avenue. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the city has received an application for OCP and zoning bylaw amendments at 2856 4th Avenue. The applicant is requesting to change the property's land use designation from general commercial to multifamily residential in the OCP and change its zoning from C7 core business to the TH1 townhouse multifamily zone. The subject property is located about 1 block east from the 3rd Ave commercial lane. It's currently vacant and has historically been used as a commercial parking lot. The surrounding neighborhood is a mix of commercial, low density, high density residential, and park zoning. And you are likely familiar with this property as this application is for the second phase of a proposed 2-phase townhouse development. Construction has begun for the first phase on the neighboring property to the south at 2846 4th Avenue, which was rezoned to the TH1 zone in 2023. And this development is designed to mirror the neighboring lot with another row of 4 2-bedroom units. As you can see, the parking for the lot would again be provided off the rear lane. Dwelling units would be accessed from the shared walkway, and usable open space would be provided through the shared porches and private lawns behind each unit. The subject property meets the OCP criteria for redesignation of land to the multifamily land use designation and meets the requirements of the TH1 zone. The property is well situated for higher density residential, and it helps provide a transition between the neighborhood's lower density R2 zones and commercial properties. The APC passed a motion at their meeting on December 21st recommending that council support the application. Pre-engagement letters were sent to owners and occupants of all properties within 100 meters of the site, and we received 1 response in support of the application. As the application includes an OCP amendment, a public hearing is required, and if amendments are adopted, the application would require a development permit. Council may choose to give amending bylaws number 5098 and 5099 at 2856 4th Avenue first and second reading and advance them to a public hearing on March 25th. Council may alternatively decline to give first reading or direct staff to provide additional information. And staff recommend that council give first and second readings to the amending bylaws and advance them to a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. Are there questions or comments from council? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just was looking through the report, and it wasn't quite clear why a public hearing is required, why this plan doesn't correspond to the OCP, or how it fits into that rule.
Planner?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this application does require an amendment to the OCP and therefore doesn't align with its current OCP designation, and so it will need a public hearing. Does that clarify, or I can provide additional?
Could you speak to the current designation under the OCP and why it doesn't fit to the new one? I think is more what is being looked for.
Yes, absolutely. So the current land use designation for the property is commercial. The proposed multifamily residential land use doesn't involve any commercial uses, and therefore it wouldn't align with its current designation.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay, Councillor Mealy.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I will move that the official community plan amendment 2856 4th Avenue bylaw number 5098 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that zoning amendment 2856 4th Avenue bylaw number 5099 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Mealy.
If I may, thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the official community plan amendment 2856 4th Avenue bylaw number 5098 be now read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that zoning amendment 2856 4th Avenue bylaw number 5099 be now read a second time.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And lastly,
One more, Madam Mayor. I move that amending bylaws number 5098 and 5099 be advanced to a public hearing on Monday, March 25th, 2024 at 6 p.m. right here at City Hall in the council chambers.
thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you very much for the report. We'll move on to correspondence for action, and we have one letter today, a letter received February 15th from the Falan Dafa Association of Vancouver requesting a letter of greeting to the performers of the Shenyang Performing Arts. Would somebody like to move that motion? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that council direct staff to provide a letter of greeting to the performers of Shenyang Performing Arts in recognition of the cultural events return to Vancouver for the 2024 season.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question. I don't remember it coming across to us before, so I'm just wondering, why would they send it to us? Any comments on that?
I think we have had this before. Yes, a few years ago. CEO?
Through the chair, I'm pretty sure we did receive this before. I wasn't here, but I believe when I looked into it, we had received it once before.
And I think it's a broad reach out to municipalities to provide welcome. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note that there have been posters up in City Hall on the public notice board for some time. That's a public place, and certainly anyone is welcome to advertise their event there. As far as council support, I'm not sure that this is a cultural event. It comes across to me as being very much a commercial event, and council, apart from the general rule about not supporting individual businesses, I don't recall that we've offered letters of support or letters of greeting to commercial events in the past. Irrespective of who the producers are, that's the differentiation that I'm making on this issue, and I would not be writing to support or a letter of greeting as it's termed a commercial event. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it is very specifically requesting letter of greeting to the performers and not at all a letter of support. And I think we have in the past for a number of different activities provided just a broad letter of greeting. So I don't see any specific concern with this because it's not support. However, it's up to council how we'd like to proceed. Other comments? Okay. Seeing no more comments on the motion, which has been moved and seconded to provide a letter of greeting, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. No proclamations today, and we'll go to correspondence for information, and I will go to our corporate officer to highlight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First off, we have a letter from TELUS regarding the copper retirement program, and then a letter from BC Restaurant and Food Services Association and Restaurants Canada regarding the Save BC Restaurants campaign. And then a letter from the Pacific Rim School District regarding a proposed sale of a vacant land on Craig Road. And then from the Office of the Premier, Ministry of Housing, regarding the BC Builds Initiative. And then the letter regarding the Community Stabilization Beds Program signed by Saskatchewan First Nation, Hupuchesset First Nation, and the City of Port Alberni. And finally, the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission minutes of January 3rd, 2024.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions or comments from council? Councillor Douglas.
Just regarding the school property on Craig Road, I wonder if we have any information about that and any relevance to our city.
Thank you. We'll go to our Director of Development Services.
As indicated in the letter from the school district, it's a vacant piece of property. It's currently zoned R2, R1 and 2 family residential zoning. It was actually created during the relocation in the new high school site. When they sold and the Klitza school field sites, they subdivided actually about 10 or 12 parcels, sold all of the parcels for single-family construction in different areas, but for, I'm not sure, didn't sell this particular piece of property at the time, are looking at potentially selling it now. It is a bit of an odd shape in that it is a panhandle piece of property, so there's a relatively narrow frontage onto Craig Road with the larger balance of the land kind of further behind. And it's near the former Klitza school site.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm kind of curious to know, I mean, I was there when all the signing and everything happened and the trades, but I'm just kind of curious to know, what is their issue for us not to sell that part of the property? I mean, what's the issue? They haven't said anything, just don't do it. And when they sell a school, do they consult us? I don't remember a lot of consultation, so.
Scott.
This is school district owned property that they are saying they're looking at potentially selling, and they're advising council that they're considering selling this property.
Well, I apologize. I take it back, pretend I didn't say anything, and I just read it wrong, obviously.
Thank you, Councillor Solda. Other comments? Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, I just haven't quite got the location. I just want to make sure. So it's beside Klitz on Craig. I'm just wondering if there's any way it can be accommodated into our current park and ball fields that we have over there. Is it completely separated?
It wouldn't be, so it's kind of to the side of the former Klitza school along Craig. It's close to some old tennis courts that I think are not used. So it wouldn't likely be valuable to incorporate into the ball fields, but could it be added to the city park area up there? Perhaps. That would be direction from council if you had any interest in staff looking at that.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
I have a question then, sorry, through you to Mr. Smith. Who owns the tennis courts then? I guess that's kind of one of the questions I'd like to know.
I'm relatively certain that is part of the city-owned facilities that are kind of tied into the ball fields there.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just if that's, and I'm sorry, I apologize, nobody can really see, that's the piece of property we're talking about right there. I'm sorry, it's very tough to say on camera. Anyways, I'm just showing a map to Mr. Smith, so I just want to make sure. But if it is the one adjacent to, between the school and the tennis courts, and the tennis courts aren't being used anymore, I can see the city using it for something down the road. But especially if we get rid of the tennis courts, if there's no need for them and they're just kind of in the way and we can develop something else there, so, but just a comment.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We recently received an invitation from Island Health that if we wanted to meet with them, we're in Victoria in April during AVICC, that we could schedule an appointment or schedule a meeting. And I was wondering if it'd be worthwhile for the city to schedule a meeting in regards to the letter requesting community stabilization beds in our community. And if for some reason they act pretty quickly and the money does come through or the funding comes through, it always is nice to meet with them just to say thank you.
Absolutely. So we have requested a meeting for the community stabilization beds specifically, which we do expect will be before AVICC, but I think regardless, we should request a meeting with Island Health at AVICC, even if we do get funding for the community stabilization beds, which we are very optimistic about. We have other needs we need to discuss with Island Health, so continued advocacy there is important. So thanks for that, Councillor Haggard. Okay, would somebody like to move receipt of our correspondence? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And we have a few items to report from in camera. So I'm just going to go to our Director of Corporate Services to just read through and highlight those for the public.
Thank you, through the mayor. First off, we're releasing for public consumption the intent to participate in the BC Builds project with Sashat First Nation, as well as releasing for public consumption notice of its intent to lease Unit 7 to the Community Arts Council of the Alberni Valley for the purpose of displaying art events and classes, and a gift shop that's down at the Harbor Quay. Also releasing quite an old resolution, council releases for public consumption amendment of the City of Port Alberni Personnel Standing Committee Duties policy by deleting the words provide support and input through the interview process to the CAO in hiring for director level exempt staff position under duties and responsibilities. And we're releasing that because we're coming forward with a new policy, perhaps for the Personnel Standing Committee. Excuse me. Also releasing for public consumption the appointment of James Lee to the Board of Variance for a 3-year term commencing February 12th, 2024 to December 31st, 2026. That should read actually January 1st, 2024. Also a notice of intent to lease a portion of the city-owned property situated at 4751 Tebow Avenue and legally described as that portion of Lot A, District Lot 137, Alberni District Plan 38945 to North Island College to operate a campus for vocational studies at a lease rate in 2024 of $141,314.10 plus GST for a term of 3 years with an option to renew for a further 3 years at fair market value. And then lastly, council can release for public consumption the release of payouts for judgments. There's 4 judgments in the favor of the City of Port Alberni from R. Brown, totaling $134,120.76. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any items councillors would like to highlight or speak to? I will just say a big thank you to our staff for all of their hard work in getting to this point on that $134,000. I know that the work on that specific piece of property spanned a lot of our administration, several different departments, and was a lot of diligent work by our staff to ticket and then end up collecting that $134,000. Council reports. We do have a couple of reports included. Are there any items councillors would like to highlight from their reports or ask questions of others? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did want to highlight, not that the first 2 parts of my report aren't important, but I did want to highlight the third part. And the reason for that is the discussion that we've had in council chambers recently due to comments from the taxpayers who are interested in knowing that council is actively attempting through various manners on a consistent basis throughout the year to lower the cost to the taxpayers. So I do note the payout that we just received of the $134,000. That's should be of note to taxpayers that the council and administration are actively pursuing debts owed to them and being responsible about that. In my report, I attended the AGM of the Vancouver Island Regional Library. This is a service offered across 38 communities on Vancouver Island and the coastal communities. And it appears as the very best of library services that I have ever encountered. Although unfortunately it doesn't turn out to be equally available to all of its members. The members of the communities each have a trustee on the board and pay a share of the library's annual budget. And while we have a seat on the board as the municipality of Port Alberni, it's difficult to influence policy with other 37 others voting in opposite directions. Not everyone on that board agrees on fiscal restraint, and that fiscal restraint should be part of the process. So when I say this is a very amazing service, it truly is a Cadillac of library services as it is touted by the staff and the members of the board. There's no lack of congratulations there. So this is not a criticism of the programs offered or the strategic plan being followed, except that I'm not sure we need to have a Cadillac and that the people of Port Alberni need to be paying for that vehicle. I think perhaps something cheaper, but in a perfectly acceptable range of a DeSoto or a Hyundai would be appropriate. Some of the things which Port Alberni taxpayers are paying for that they may not know about include electric car charging stations in Masset, meeting rooms in facilities other than Port Alberni, overdose alarms in the washrooms of facilities other than Port Alberni, upgrades in facilities other than Port Alberni, free access to music streaming downloads, and free access to movie downloads and streaming, and free access to video games. All of which are very nice things. They are good services, and they are the services one would expect if you were buying a Cadillac. They are not the types of services that are fundamentally required to have a car that simply gets groceries. In summary, that's a nice library, but can we see something in our price range? Should Port Alberni taxpayers be buying an electric car charger in another community? Are electric car chargers even properly part of the mandate of libraries? What does the choice of fuel have to do with improving literacy? I don't see any diesel pumping stations being purchased. And when it comes to movies and video games, I can't imagine the day when the Port Alberni taxpayer would ask this council to increase their taxes so that everyone in Port Alberni could get a free Netflix account. In my opinion, Port Alberni is paying too much for the services that we receive, and we may not want all of the services that we are being offered. Now, Madam Mayor, I make that report so that the public is aware Thank you, Madam. So the public is aware of the services they receive from the library that we have very little control over. But that, as one voice amongst 37 others, or 38 others, this council is attempting to exert some fiscal restraint over the costs of our library, and we will continue to do so. In this time of budget and increased taxes being before the general public, this is information that I think is important for the public in Port Alberni to know.
Thank you, Councillor Patola, and well said. I could not agree more. I think we have an incredible service. However, it is not necessarily the area of focus where our community would choose to put their funds. I think we all recognize we need a library. However, the Cadillac of library services is a very good description to what we're paying for with very little say in how those funds are spent. So I know we've had a lot of conversation about this. We've had public conversation at the regional district as well, and we will continue to, but appreciate you bringing forward information. And I think Councillor Haggard may want to speak to the regional district side of this as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The director and the chair of the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board recently gave a presentation at the ACRD meeting. And 2 points that I made is, well, 3 points. I said we support the library. We actually sent in a resolution to AVICC that they get more and regular funding from the province, regular increases. But 2 points that I made about their services need to be more equitable. You can't pick and choose what services that you offer in one, but not the other. If you're going to offer one service in library, it needs to be offered to every library. You can't pick and choose anymore. It's just not fair. Because like Councillor Patola said, we're paying for those wonderful services, but we're not receiving those services. And the second point I made is I realize that they feel that we are not in need of renovations, but we need to make our library more culturally welcome. So I asked them to please come review that and see if they could do any updating for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I'm just kind of curious with our reps here. User pay, have they considered user pay? I mean, if we're not going to have Netflix or internet or gaming, or we pay for what we use?
Councillor Patola, maybe you could speak to the portion of the Library Act that allocates funding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without reciting it off the top of my head, because I've only read section 1, or have that memorized anyways, the Library Act does allow for the current funding plan or schedule to be revised. And currently it's done on a per capita and assessed value basis, like many other partitions of funding throughout the province. But it does allow for a vote of the board to change that, and certainly anticipates a user pay type of arrangement. I'm not sure whether the board would support that, and because the vote would be weighted on that, it's unlikely to pass, but that doesn't mean it's not worth trying and pursuing.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that forward. Any other comments on this? Okay, thanks again for the report. I think it's a very important one, and the conversation that we'll be continuing, possibly even bringing forward the user pay change, or moving more toward that user pay change, even if it does fail, bringing it forward for discussion, so that we can bring some light to the inequity in what we are receiving for service locally in our community versus what we are paying for. That conversation is very important to be having. Okay, would somebody like to move receipt of council reports? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favour? Carried, none opposed. On to new business. Item number 1, we have the toxic drug strategies from Sashot First Nation and the Community Action Team. Recommendation from the February 20th Committee of the Whole. Councillor Mealy, would you like to read the first one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that Council endorse the Port Alberni Community Action Team document entitled Blueprint of Transformative Strategies to the Toxic Drug Catastrophe for the Alberni Valley in British Columbia, dated February 20th, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief. I had a long explanation at the COW meeting with regards to this, the CAT Team Blueprint strategies. For those reasons, I remain not in support of it, but again, wanted to recognize the hard work that went into it and the benefits that come from the opinions expressed therein.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And item B, Councillor Mealy.
Sure, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council support the next steps with respect to implementation and advocacy for resourcing the Alberni Valley Toxic Poison Drugs Opioid Crisis Strategy through a smaller political working group / action team.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. If you want to continue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council direct staff to prepare a letter of support and authorize the Mayor in signing the Declaration of Commitment with respect to the Alberni Valley Toxic Poison Drugs Opioid Crisis Strategy as circulated.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 2, we have policy 3002-5, request for letters of support, recommendations from the February 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there questions or comments? I do note that the changes have been made that were discussed at the committee of the whole meeting. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that council approve policy 3002-5, request for letter of support.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 3, we have travel policy 3009-2 amendment. And this is council travel policy amendments as a result of discussion from the last meeting. Are there comments? Councillor Douglas, would you like to read this one?
My goodness, yes, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that council approve the amendment to travel policy 3009-2 to permit council to consider authorization of any councillors expressing interest in attending the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference and trade show.
Thank you. And is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Are there comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if this goes through, we are sending people to the next FCM, and may I ask who are going to be attending on behalf of council?
It is the next item on the agenda, and I believe it's myself, that's okay, Councillor Haggard, Councillor Dame, and Councillor Patola, who have indicated that they are available. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 4, FCM 2024 Annual Conference and Trade Show, authorized council representation. Councillor Dame, would you like to read this one?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council authorize, so that was myself, Councillor Patola, Councillor Haggard, and the mayor, to participate with the mayor in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities 2024, redefining our future annual conference and trade show taking place June 6th to 9th, 2024 in Calgary, Alberta, with authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred as per travel policy 3009-2.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda, and just, you did say yourself, Councillor Haggard, Councillor Patola, and myself, right? Wonderful, thank you. I thought I missed Councillor Patola. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Item number 5, UBCM Local Government Development Approval Program Grant Application. We'll call a planner up to manager planning to speak to this. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Staff are seeking direction from council on a grant application to UBCM's Local Government Development Approvals Program. And this program is offering 100% funding for improving development review and approvals processes in local governments. And they're offering $150,000 total, and that work would need to be completed within a year if we were successful in receiving the grant receiving the grant. I'm getting a little bit of echo, sorry. I'll try and back away from my mic. But for staff, the main activities we would undertake are really reviewing those development review and approval processes for best practices. That includes the quality and the quantity of information we make available to the public and council and the development community to create that more transparent process. We'd also review our existing bylaws for how they could be improved to make review and approvals more efficient. And then also we would be looking at how we cooperate with other departments internally on development review and approvals as well to get those efficiencies, because development review does involve most departments in the city at some point. We all work together on it. And the intent for this work is that we would hire a consultant to do the bulk of it. If we were successful, and if council supports this application, we would apply by March 8th, which is the deadline for the program. And I just want to reiterate that this is a program which offers 100% funding, which means there's no matching or in-kind contribution required of council. This is an initiative from the province that they've been working on for a number of years. In its latest iteration, this program intake, it is really about improving development review with the hopes that the delivery of housing especially would be more efficient and effective. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information. I think that's an excellent initiative, and I'm glad to know that it as well is on top of the other funds we have received from the province for planning changes and reacting to some of the provincial changes that have happened in this budget year. Any additional questions from council? Seeing none, Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that Council for the City of Port Alberni direct staff to prepare and apply to the UBCM Local Government Development Approvals Program for funding to engage an employee and/or consultant to undertake the activities identified in the staff report dated February 13th, 2024 to support the improvement of development approval processes.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments or questions? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 6, I'll go to Councillor Patola to speak to municipal campgrounds.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have included a background document which I will explain after making the motion. The motion, whereas the City of Port Alberni is a modern urban community nestled within and integrated with the natural beauty of Vancouver Island, and whereas the City of Port Alberni budgets over $100,000 per annum for tourist promotion services, and whereas tourism studies have indicated an average tourist stay of 3 days, and whereas tourism studies indicate an average tourist spending of $400 over the entire stay, whereas it's logical to conclude that tourists require some form of habitation during the period of their stay, and whereas the City of Port Alberni contains less than the desired per capita number of hospitality beds, and whereas the City of Port Alberni does not have a municipal campground to facilitate the extended stay of tourists who travel with self-accommodation, therefore, be it resolved, I move that Council direct City Administration to research and report on the feasibility of constructing a campground facility located on the city-owned lands at 4356 and 4340 Gertrude Street, or such alternate location as suggested as suitable.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it for discussion.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda, and I'll go to Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So essentially, it is that the city spends $100,000 at least per year to promote tourism, but there's nowhere for tourists to stay in Port Alberni. When I say nowhere, that's a very broad generalization, but there's certainly no campgrounds that are immediately available within the city center. There are campgrounds outside of the community. All of them require some form of extended travel to get to the community center. The provincial studies on spending indicate larger periods of stay rather than just 1 day of passing through. And the location on Gertrude Street that I've identified is ideally located. It's right on the new trail that we've completed, the Key to Key Trail and the Roger Creek Scott Kenny Extension Trail. It's close to bakeries, grocery stores, cultural galleries, breweries, restaurants, and basically all other services one could want, including automotive parts stores or dentist offices. Not that tourists would need that, but it's ideally located. The site used to contain a motel and a restaurant, so there are services to the site, and it's currently unused right now except for the occasional taxi parking, people waiting for rides. So I included a spreadsheet, and it's fairly rough, but it points out that there are some 8 to 10 other municipalities that advertise on Google having local community campgrounds. And I think the best comparator to Port Alberni is Princeton, where their campground is somewhat outside of the city center, but contains about the same number of lots as we could have here, and they make a gross of over $400,000 a year. And I have confirmed that number with the mayor of Princeton. So I did a rough breakdown that there could be about 80 lots on the square footage that is on these two city-owned lots, so 80 campsites, and at a very restrained amount of suggesting that there's $30 a night, and we only have campers for 210 nights of the year and only an 80% occupancy at that, it still ends up producing a gross of $403,000 with expected expenses of approximately $100,000 for caretakers, leaves a $300,000 profit per year. That's a 16.15% return on the investment, being the value of that land plus the value of upgrades to the infrastructure to make it a campground. It just seems to me, Madam Mayor, that in these times of fiscal restraint and increasing taxation, that not only is it incumbent upon City Council to try to reduce our costs, but when there are available assets that the city is in possession of that could be income producing but currently are not, that it should at least be looked at as a possibility of a enterprise to undertake. So since it's been done in other communities and other communities have shown the benefit of it, not just financially, but also with benefits to the general economy of campers staying within the community, within the city limits, I put forward this motion for council's consideration and possible further consideration by our administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dame.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Rotella, I very much agree with the idea of pursuing increasing the city's revenue streams, and I agree that as we are wrestling with ways to sort of keep the tax increases constrained, that is certainly one thing that I agree we should be looking at. My main concern with this is that considering the amount of projects that the city currently has on the go, and when we consider our now next later timeline, I do have concerns about staff capacity and what might have to get bumped out of the queue in order to fit this in. I also have some concerns about the location, whether or not that's where I personally think it should go. Is sort of an aside at this point, because I think that would have to be, if we ever got to that point, a part of the broader conversation. It would be part of a staff report, I'm sure. But yeah, it's mainly considering that it would be an investment, and as you've demonstrated, there's a lot of potential there. So my concerns aren't so much financial as they are just simply the capacity for our staff to take on another project of that scale in the near future. So I'm hesitant to support this at this time unless we could sort of put a more long-term, adjustment to the wording. Yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dane. Councillor Solda, and then Councillor Haggard.
All right, so I worry, the zoning, the OCP plan, I mean, I know that we're working on all those, and that's a interesting, I do agree with your concept, but we bought that property for a reason, and I can't remember in history why, even the corner lot that's on the other side of the creek, there was a reason we bought it. And I know the trail was one big thing to connect trails years back. So I don't remember much of the history on that. I just remember it. Interesting, who would manage it? Would it be staff or would we have a contractor? The other 80 campsites, that's a lot on that piece of property. I'm just kind of curious to know, is that overcapacity? Because then do you need a dumping station? There's all that other stuff, infrastructure that needs to go with a campsite. The other one is, I would like to see it go on the strategic plan for the future because it is not in our strategic plan. We also know that there is a government, First Nation government, looking at a campsite, so there will be a future. Now, I worry, like, revenue is great, love the revenue, but what's the cost to do all this? I mean, does it outweigh? Is there grants? Now, the other thing is, I do want people to realize 4th Avenue at the park on 4th Avenue down the hill, there was a campsite. and the contractor, it was contracted out years back to the C group of companies. Now, we know the C group of companies is a well-respected businessman in Port Alberni. And he tried and tried, but it didn't work out. So he pulled out of the contract, and we moved on. And somebody else wanted to come in and say, hey, we'll do it. But if the C group of companies couldn't do it, what made this other person think they could do it? They didn't have a proper business plan, et cetera. So I have concerns on the bigger picture. I think there's a lot more to look into. And again, staff capacity. I mean, we have projects that have been on the books that aren't finished and completed from a year or so ago, and it's just capacity. So I do have concerns. We know on the hump, there is First Nations have a campsite out there. It's a longer way into our community too, but I think we need to look at a bigger plan. There has been movement in the past by city to have a campsite. We did have someone that wanted to come in, and they wanted to go behind the Pacific Rim Mall, but we couldn't get it out of the LAR. Yeah. And so then we had another location, and it was just too small. And this campsite was one where you could camp at one end of the island to another end of the island. They owned all that. And that was during when Councillor Douglas was mayor, and we took a tour of their campsite. It was amazing. But so that's where that's at. There's so many questions and unanswered questions that need to be done before we move forward.
Thank you so much. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Councillor Bertola for his thinking outside the box. And we always need to increase revenues for the city, but I don't think I can support this motion at this time for several reasons. Number one, it's not included in our strategic plan. If we focus on everything, we focus on nothing. Operating a campground is not a core service of the city. And I think we have to get back to just offering core services and get away from all these extras that the city does offer. The city does not have the capacity at this time to operate a campground. We always have to look at the highest and best use for a piece of property, and I think we could do much better on this piece of property than a campground. I think if we want a campground within our city, it would be better served to have a private business come in, purchase a piece of property, and operate the campground and pay yearly taxes on it. And as with every entrepreneur, there is a tendency to over-project revenues, under-project expenses, and startup costs have not been considered in this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made, and I'll just add a few. I really like I think there's value in exploring the concept of a campground in the city. I really like the thought of placing it on or near the key to key. I think that access and transportation, that really opens up a lot of options for people and showcases some of the areas of our community that we want to be showcasing. So I think that I like the location thought for that reason. I think we should keep in mind that what didn't work in the past doesn't necessarily not work today. Our community has changed a lot, and tourism potential in our community has changed a lot in the last 10 plus years. So I think the comments around strategic plan are valid, and it a little bit funny when I saw this motion come forward, because it actually was included in our last strategic plan of last council, not for the municipality specifically to develop a campground, but to look for opportunities to develop a campground. For me, the fact that it's not included in this strategic plan, that means council removed it because we worked from our last strategic plan in developing our new one. So council removed it, made it a non-priority for this term, and for that reason, I won't support moving on it today. That said, I would like to see this brought to our next strategic planning review, because I do think there's a lot of value in exploring the potential. I just think council needs to make a conscious decision to add it into the slot of work. And we need to be able to see in a strategic plan review what that means we're not doing as a result, or what we're putting it ahead of. So I'd like to propose that not an amendment to the motion, because the motion is very well worded and thought out, but I mean, I guess I could propose that we refer it to our next council strategic plan review, but I'll await any further conversation before that. And I think last comments. I don't love the location either, but recognizing that the motion does leave open to look for other suitable locations. So just generally my comments, I think it's well worth discussing. I want to do it in the greater context of the strategic plan, and I think having a municipal campground either run by the municipality or even better, not by the municipality, but the municipality facilitating it maybe to a nonprofit or to a for-profit business, possibly someone like the chamber would be interested in taking it on. I think there's a lot of options, and this motion leaves all of those open for consideration. I would just like that we bring it to strategic plan review. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with regards to what are all the added costs, you will see, of course, these are numbers somewhat from the air, having never run a campground myself. But you will note that included in the costs are the assessed values of the properties being $971,000 and $357,000 together, an added $200,000 for the building of an amenities building, and another $300,000 for infrastructure expenses. So the total production of the campground is a new $500,000 to be put in it, is in the budget. That's not saying that's what it's going to cost, because I don't know that. But in keeping with the costs of putting in the infrastructure at the tiny homes, which is set up for 30 units, there's some similarity in the costing there. So it's somewhat realistic, although probably not entirely close to being accurate. But in any event, those costs were accounted for. Then the costs for running it are expenses per annum are set at $108,000 a year. So these are costs that are in keeping with those reported from the other municipalities that I've included in the survey that essentially set out what their income is or what their budgeted expenses are from their available financial documents on the internet. It's not a complete survey, but it's certainly a good start. So in any event, what we have right now is $1.2 million worth of assets that haven't produced any income for over 10 years, probably 15 or more years, except that I think they produced the stump of a maple tree and a parking spot for cabs. So it's simply the city not using its assets, an asset that could produce $500,000 a year or just under. To not even consider it would be, to me, irresponsible. Is it within the strategic plan? Certainly. It fills out concepts of a safe community, access to the waterfront, including our tourist population, a thriving community by providing economic impacts in an area of downtown that this city has never been able to decide where its downtown is. It provides housing, although be it on a transient status, it provides housing. And I might even wonder if it would affect a bit of the currently housed population that live in RVs but park on streets, as opposed to having a place to park and still access the services of the town. So it certainly does fall within our strategic plans. It might not be a core service, but the city spends vast amounts of money on improving the city, all of which are non-producing, non-income producing. This is an opportunity to improve the city and garner a significant amount of income from it. Now, $400,000 would be approximately 0.02% of our budget. So thus, the request in the motion is for administration to research and report on the feasibility thereof. We have some significant expertise in our administration at the moment with regards to the building of the Key to Key Trail. That type of a facility is similar to the type of land preparation that would be necessary for a campground. And again, as I noted, it goes right alongside the Key to Key Trail. So Anyways, council will vote as they wish. I think it's certainly defensible enough in its ideological stage for a better report with more researchable numbers than I can provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patola. Councillor Dane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How often do we do strategic planning reviews, and do we know when the next one will be?
Thank you. We don't have a set schedule, but in history, we've done them twice a year. We don't have a schedule for the next one specifically. Councillor Dane.
Okay, in that case, I would like to move that we postpone the motion on the floor until a committee of the whole following our next strategic planning review.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? I will second. Other comments? Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just to clarify, you said we do strategic planning twice a year, or do you mean twice a term?
No, a review of our strategic plan. Yes, so just a review of where we're at with things, a review of the now next later document. So historically last term, we definitely did twice a year. This term, I would say we're probably due reasonably soon since our strategic plan came out last year. Thanks. Okay, other comments or comments on the motion to postpone?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if I should have if we should be postponing it to the next public meeting, right, because we wouldn't be making a motion at the committee of the whole. We would be making a recommendation, and so maybe I could change the wording on that. Friendly amendment to myself. So, yeah, does that make sense? That we public meeting instead of committee of the whole? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none. So this is on the motion to postpone, which I think might be more effectively the motion to refer to. Thank you. Is council comfortable with motion to refer? Wonderful. I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm going to go with it. Councillor Patola, you can disagree if you want to disagree. I'm not saying you disagree. Wonderful. Okay, on the motion to refer, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you so much. And thanks for bringing this forward. We will move on to question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council on decisions or recommendations made during the course of this meeting. A maximum of 3 questions permitted per speaker. For those participating electronically, please use the raise your hand feature if you would like to ask a question. Thank you. Joseph, please come forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Joseph Laskosic. I live here in Port Alberni. Just a couple things. I'm just trying to clarify some things, but there's one thing I want to bring to the attention of I'm sure you all know of this, but to do with the toxic drug strategies, there's a video conference type thing at the school board has they've posted it recently online. You can go and watch it. I think it's over an hour and so. I'm just getting into it now, watching it. But it has to do with exploitation and human trafficking here in Port Alberni. And it's a watch that everybody should be looking at. And it mentions in there that they are going to be plastering, and the words are used, plastering around town, signs, stop human trafficking in Port Alberni. So there's going to be signs put up there and in the school. So I think my question is, if I can frame it in a question form, I'm sure you're all aware of this, has been brought up probably through different sources, but that there is a video on there recently, because it was talked about a long time ago at one of the school board meetings. They finally gotten together and forming a group to again combat this. So, and just I'm wondering if you're all aware of that or not. I guess that'd be my question.
Thank you. I was not aware of it. So thank you for bringing it forward. I'll certainly go look for it.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to leave them for the next committee of the whole meeting because they're just kind of general stuff. But the only one I have, I'm not, Roland sort of follows taxes. He's more, much better than I am. The only thing I'm questioning or have a question on is on page 34 of today's agenda. It's the revitalization tax exemptions. And I'm just looking at, which has been amended a few times. I can maybe just read it and then ask for some clarification. So council adopted City of Port Alberni Revitalization Tax Exemption Program Bylaw number 4824 in 2013, an aggressive bylaw designed to encourage revitalization of the uptown area. Council amended the bylaw in March 2016 to include Harbor Key and city-owned properties to the schedule of eligible properties. Also in 2016, Council adopted a new revitalization tax exemption bylaw covering all other commercial areas. Pretty broad. Council objective is to stimulate growth and development in the city's commercial areas by encouraging investment in new commercial space and improvements to existing commercial buildings. In 2023, one application was received and approved. So since 2016, it sounds like there hasn't been any new applicants during that time, but there has been one in last year, and it was received and approved. So this approval application experienced the first tax exemption, or will, in 2024. It is to be in effect for a period of 10 years, expires December 31st, 2033. I'm not really familiar with that whole tax exemption thing, because it does, in the previous page, kind of list a number of things that fall under that, from recreational programs, things that benefit community. But here it sounds like businesses, commercial spaces can apply for this revitalization tax exemption. And the one that's currently been approved for a 10-year period. And I don't know if places like Colson's Uptown and the old Woodward's building falls under that. I hope not. That's, if there's a big business, then they're there for a profit. And so I'm not, that would include that. So what does this mean for the average person looks at and said, okay, why are places being exempt from taxes when residents are paying their good portion of it? And in the previous page, it mentions in 2023, 56 and I know there's probably, I don't know all the different places, but there was an approximate value of $313,000 in tax exemption. So if you can just maybe speak that and clarify to me and maybe some others. Yeah.
Thank you. So a couple things. Firstly, permissive tax exemption and commercial revitalization tax exemptions are separate. So the previous page that's talking about the programs for investing in recreation and other things, that's a nonprofit program that is completely separate from commercial tax revitalization bylaw that we have. Andrew might want to provide more clarification to our commercial exemption program. But I will say from my own perspective that it has been ineffective as a result of there only being one application. And I know we have discussed this in the past as well. This is something that's not uncommon in municipalities to have a commercial revitalization exemption bylaw, and specifically to look to incentivize development in the areas that you want to see development. However, we broadened it out to basically the whole community. And for years, a couple of years at least, since we have been seeing a lot more investment in our community, we've been having conversations, council to council from time to time, talking about why we have this still. If it's not incentivizing that development, if the development is just benefiting from it because we happen to have it and it's not actually bringing them to the community, then we're just giving up tax dollars. So I would personally love to see us do away with that bylaw. But Andrew, maybe you could just provide a little bit more history on what it is and how it's used in municipalities.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to the member of the public. So with this one, just to be clear, we did have one application that was successful in 2023, but prior to that, I think it was in 2021, there was another one. So this is just updating the tax bylaw, or the financial plan bylaw, sorry, to reflect some of the activity that is in this past year. So as Madam Mayor mentioned, you do have the opportunity as a local government to set up the revitalization tax exemptions in certain areas to incentivize the redevelopment in areas. So this is a bylaw that was updated and mentioned in the financial plan bylaw, just to show that it expanded to all Class 6 Class 6 commercial properties. So it wasn't specified for the downtown core, it was expanded to every single class 6, I believe, in the city of Port Alberni. So this one obviously is class 6. There hasn't been a lot of uptick on it, but I think hearing from council now that maybe we'll bring back a report and bring some more information on this. But it is a tool that municipalities are provided to incentivize that redevelopment in areas and renew commercial areas. So.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that it's an effective economic development tool and has been in some communities. And I think it probably was best used as a tool in our community to potentially incentivize development in a specific area where we felt we really wanted to see a revitalization. And now, if people are choosing to come to the community to invest here, it's because it makes financial sense. And if they happen to take advantage of the bylaw, they probably made their decision to invest here already anyways. So I don't think it was a different time in the community when it was implemented for sure. And the very minor uptick on it has, I would say, indicates that we need to make a change to it. So thanks for bringing it up. We have had discussion about it a year or so ago, but we haven't actually given any formal direction to make changes to it yet. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to give a little background as well, just because we talked about this before 2008 and it was actually put in. At the time I asked why don't we put the whole city under that, and it was just the uptown area, and I was hoping to go down 3rd Avenue. But back then the decision was made, from what I remember, was because of the absentee landlords in the uptown area. And so maybe just for an example of how it works, if it still works the same way that I remember, if I own City Hall and I wanted to do, and it was assessed at $500,000, I'm getting taxed on that assessment. If I do upgrades to it and it's now $750,000, for the next 10 years, I still only pay taxes on the $500,000. That's the incentive. So then in 10 years' time, you have to pay the full bill. But it's the incentive for whoever owns the building to upkeep and give a new facade or whatever it is. And that's, from what I understand, Councillor Solda was on at the same time. So that was the history of it when the community charter changed and the provincial government gave us that option. So.
I think the new version of it actually has a more aggressive incentive for larger investments. So we won't necessarily, it is publicly available online. We won't necessarily speak to the details of it, but absolutely that's the intent. And again, it was in a time when I think we were really looking for development in the community, and a tax incentive probably wasn't enough to get people to invest in our community at that point in time. I think now we're in a different time in the community. We're seeing a lot of investment and a lot of development happen. And now there's maybe an opportunity to rethink, do we want it? And if we do want it, what do we want to incentivize? We've had a lot of discussion about commercial on the main floor and residential above. We may want to incentivize additional density. There's other ways to do that. But yeah, I think it's a great topic of discussion and something that could come back to council in the very near future. So thanks for the question. Any other questions from members of the public online? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Sorry, just point of order before we are going back to a previously recessed in-camera meeting. So I just wanted to note that. I don't think we need to do anything special, but just note for public record so that they're aware. On the motion to terminate this meeting, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thanks.